William Clark, who would become the governor of the Missouri Territory, was born August 1, 1770. He was a much younger brother of Revolutionary War General George Rogers Clark. You may recall my post of Thomas Jefferson writing to George Rogers Clark with an idea of exploring the West. His younger brother, William, took trip with Meriwether Lewis, the Corps of Discovery expedition. About the time of the centennial, in 1904, new material was found in Clark documents inherited by the Voorhees family. Celebrating the bicentennial of the Corps of Discovery, I was one of many reenactors traveling up the Missouri River with Bud Clark, one of William Clark's descendants. In the following letter, Meriwether Lewis, having been contacted by Jefferson, invited his friend William Clark to be co-captains. To convey an adequate idea of the significance of those documents, it will be necessary briefly to review the curious history of the official journals of that hardy enterprise, planned by President Jefferson, who had for 20 years been eager to learn something definite of the far West, and an exploration toward the Pacific between the Missouri and Pacific was one of his most ardent schemes. 3 previous projects with George Rogers Clark in 1783, John Ledyard in 1786, and André Michaud in 1793, had from various causes proved a failure. Being now president, as such, he was able to induce Congress to grant the necessary aid to a new expedition. At that date, 1802-3, it was very difficult to get a man with some knowledge of science who had, besides scholarly ability, the necessary courage, good habits, good health, and somewhat adapted to the woods, and what was considered most essential, a man in a measure familiar with Western Indians. Not being able to find such a man who had his confidence, the president recognized in his private secretary, Meriwether Lewis, who had fought so well in Western Indian campaigns with General Anthony Wayne, who, as history says, was prudent but severe. Meriwether Lewis possessed all the traits of General Wayne with a cooler head and more reserve. Washington, June 19, 1803. Dear Clark,
Herewith enclosed you will receive papers belonging to your brother General Clark, which sometime since you requested me to procure and forward to you. Pray excuse delay which has taken place. It has really proceeded from causes which I could not control. Mr. Thompson Mason, the gentleman in whose possession they were, is a member of the Virginia legislature, and was absent, of course, from his residence until March. Previous to his return, I was compelled to leave this place on a matter of business, which had detained me in Lancaster and Philadelphia until the day before yesterday, and since my return, having possessed myself of the papers, I seized the first moment to forward them to you. In this claim, I wish you success most sincerely. From the long and uninterrupted friendship and confidence which has subsisted between us, I feel no hesitation in making to you the following communication under the fullest impression that it will be held by you inviolable secret until I see you, or you shall hear from me again. During the last session of Congress, a law was passed in conformity to a private message of the President of the United States, entitled An Act Making an Appropriation for Extending the External Commerce of the United States. The object of this act, as understood by its framers, was to give the sanction of the government to exploring the interior of the continent of North America, or that part of it bordering on the Missouri and Columbia rivers. This enterprise has been confided to me by the President, and in consequence, since the beginning of March, I have been engaged in making the necessary preparations for the tour. These arrangements being now nearly completed, I shall set out for Pittsburgh, the intended point of embarkation, about the last of this month, and as soon after, as from the state of the water you can reasonably expect me, I shall be with you, say about the 10th of August. To aid me in this enterprise, I have the most ample and hearty support that the government can give in every possible shape. I am armed with the authority of the government of the U.S. for my protection, so far as its authority or influence extends. In addition to which, the further aid has been given me of liberal passports from the ministers both of France and England. I am instructed to select from any corps in the army a number of non-commissioned officers and privates, not exceeding 12, who may be disposed voluntarily to enter into this service, and am also authorized to engage any other men not soldiers that I may think useful in promoting the objects or success of this expedition. I am likewise furnished with letters of credit and authorized to draw on the government for any sum necessary for the comfort of myself and party. To all the persons engaged in this service, I am authorized to offer the following rewards by way of inducement. 1. The bounty, if not a soldier, but in both cases, 6 months' pay in advance. 2. To discharge them from the service, if they wish it, immediately on their return from the expedition, giving them their arrears of pay, clothing, etc. And 3. To secure to them a portion of land equal to that given by the United States to the officers and soldiers who served in the Revolutionary Army. This is a short view of means with which I am entrusted to carry this plan of the government into effect. I will now give you a short sketch of my plan of operation. I shall embark at Pittsburgh with a party of recruits, 8 or 9 in number, intended only to manage the boat and are not calculated on as a permanent part of my detachment. When descending the Ohio, it shall be my duty by inquiry to find out and engage some good hunters, stout, healthy, unmarried young men, accustomed to the woods and capable of bearing bodily fatigue in a pretty considerable degree. Should any young men answering this description be found in your neighborhood, I would thank you to give information of them on my arrival at the Falls of the Ohio, and if possible, learn the probability of their engaging in this service. This may be done, perhaps, by holding out the idea that the direction of this expedition, if up the Mississippi to its source and thence to the Lake of the Woods, stating the probable period of absence at about 18 months. If they would engage themselves in a service of this description, there would be but little doubt that they would engage in the real design when it became necessary to make it known to them, which I should take care to do before I finally engaged them. The soldiers that will most probably answer this expedition best will be found in some of the companies stationed at Massac, Kaskaskias, and Illinois. Pardon this digression from the description of my plan. It is to descend the Ohio in a keeled boat of about 10 tons burthen, from Pittsburgh to its mouth, thence up the Mississippi to the mouth of the Missouri, and up that river as far as its navigation is practicable with a boat of this description. There to prepare canoes of bark or rawhides, and proceed to its source, and, if practicable, pass over to the waters of the Columbia or Oregon River, and by descending it reach the Western Ocean. The mouth of this river lies about 140 miles south of Nootka Sound, at which place there is a considerable European trading establishment, and from which it will be easy to obtain a passage to the United States by way of the East Indies in some of the trading vessels that visit Nootka Sound annually, provided it should be thought more expedient to do so than to return by the route I had pursued in my outward-bound journey. The present season being already so far advanced, I do not calculate on getting further than 200 or 300 miles up the Missouri before the commencement of the ensuing winter. At this point, wherever it may be, I shall make myself as comfortable as possible during the winter and resume my journey as early in the spring as the ice will permit. Should nothing take place to defeat my progress altogether, I feel confident that my passage to the Western Ocean can be effected by the end of the next summer or the beginning of autumn. In order to subsist my party with some degree of comfort during the ensuing winter, I shall engage some French traders at Illinois to attend me to my wintering ground with a sufficient quantity of flour, pork, etc., to serve them plentifully during the winter, and thus be able to set out in the spring with a healthy and vigorous party.
So much for the great outlines of this scheme. Permit me now to mention partially the objects which it has in view, or those which are desirable to effect through its means, and then conclude this lengthy communication. You must know in the first place that very sanguine expectations are at this time formed by our government that the whole of that immense country watered by the Mississippi and its tributary streams, Missouri inclusive, will be the property of the U.S. in less than 12 months from this date. But let me again impress you with the necessity of keeping this matter a perfect secret. In such a state of things, therefore, as we have every reason to hope, you will readily conceive the importance to the U.S. of an early and intimate acquaintance with the tribes that inhabit that country. That they should be early impressed with the just idea of the rising importance of the U.S. and of her friendly dispositions towards them, as also her desire to become useful to them by furnishing them, through her citizens, with such articles by way of barter as may be desired by them or useful to them. The other objects of this mission are scientific and, of course, not less interesting to the U.S. than to the world generally. Such as the ascertaining by celestial observation the geography of the country through which I shall pass, the names of the nations who inhabit it, the extent and limits of their several possessions, their relations with other tribes and nations, their language, traditions, and monuments, their ordinary occupations in fishing, hunting, war, arts, and the implements for their food, clothing, and domestic accommodation, the diseases prevalent among them and the remedies they use, the articles of commerce they may need or furnish, and to what extent, the soil and face of the country, its growth and vegetable productions, its animals, the mineral productions of every description, and in short, to collect the best possible information relative to whatever the country may afford as a tribute to general science. My instruments for celestial observation are an excellent set, and my supply of Indian presents is sufficiently ample. Thus, my friend, you have, so far as leisure will at this time permit me to give it you, a summary view of the plan, the means, and the objects of this expedition. If therefore there is anything under those circumstances in this enterprise that would induce you to participate with me in its fatigues, its dangers, and its honors, believe me there is no man on earth with whom I should feel equal pleasure in sharing them as with yourself. I make this communication to you with the privity of the President, who expresses an anxious wish that you would consent to join me in this enterprise. He has authorized me to say that in the event of your accepting this proposition, he will grant you a captain's commission, which of course will entitle you to the pay and emoluments attached to that office, and will equally with myself entitle you to such portion of land as was granted to officers of similar rank for their revolutionary services. The commission with which he proposes to furnish you is not to be considered temporary but permanent, if you wish it. Your situation, if joined with me in this mission, will in all respects be precisely such as my own. Pray write to me on this subject as early as possible, and direct to me at Pittsburgh. Should you feel disposed not to attach yourself to this party in an official character, and at the same time feel the disposition to accompany me as a friend